Hey there, everybody. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to host this panel. This is the second part of our series for the Austin Shopify Meetup called, it's called Calmly Navigating the COVID-19 Storm. And so we're helping Shopify business owners, e-commerce businesses alike, navigate this storm calmly. And those two words are intentional. So the first one being calm. It's a lot of noise that's circling around us right now, a lot of crazy things going on, a lot of things to distract. And so potential for anxiety and stress is there. So we want to have a level-headed, calm perspective, and then also help give practical and navigational insights that help you navigate this time effectively and calmly. And so today's topic is on e-commerce shipping in a pandemic. And we've got this all-star panel that we're super excited for and thankful for. They're generous, gifted, and experienced all at the same time. And I'm going to introduce each of these folks, and then I'll jump into a little bit on framing the conversation. And then from there, we'll go in to the rest of the discussion. So first off, we've got Krish Iyer. Could you wave your hand? Krish Iyer. He is the head of industry relations and strategic partnerships for Shipstation here in Austin. And he's focused on long-term relationships and e-commerce merchants and marketplaces. He's got 18 years of experience or more across FedEx and Pitney Bowes, Shipstation, Neopost. He's an expert in cross-border marketplace e-commerce. He's been quoted by publications like Wall Street Journal and Logistics Management and DC Velocity and various panels as well, like this one. Next, we've got Ryan Zaczynski. Ryan is like a Swiss Army knife of e-commerce, as far as I know. He's done a lot. He's done everything from owning and operating his own digital strategy and consulting business. He served as COO for leather goods company. He's invented a couple products that he's raised money for and is working on right now. He runs social media analytics and advertising. He's also built out entire back-end logistics, enabling shipping to 90 plus countries for Wool & Oak, the leather goods company that he was COO of. He's also working on a client with me and helping work on some shipping, an interesting shipping problem as well. And so we're really excited to have Ryan here as well. And so thanks so much, Ryan, for being here.
Absolutely.
Next, we've got JB Sauceda. And could you wave for, yeah, there we go. JB's the CEO of Sauceda Industries. He's serving small and mid-market merchants with e-commerce fulfillment solutions that, quote, aren't terrible. And I love that. And so after a career in advertising, JB launched his own store and scaled it to 7 figures. He's now like leveraging those learnings to serve merchants with this 3PL. It serves 50 plus merchants around the country. And JB located in Austin, is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. And then next is Ben, and I'm gonna butcher this last name, but Ben de Lingeris, is that right? Okay, there we go. But yeah, I always have a hard time with that. So Ben's got a PhD in physics and postdoc in distributed computing. He is the senior product manager for shipping at Shopify. And we're excited to have Shopify presence here. He's started and sold his own computing service company. He's worked with the acquirer for a few years and then relaunched another venture in wine and e-commerce in Australia, actually. And then decided to join an e-commerce agency as a CTO, and then later has joined Shopify. So, and then I'll just introduce myself. My resume is not quite as impressive as these folks, but right now I'm a partner and a fractional CFO/COO for Amplify. And what we do is we offer cash flow planning and cash flow management solutions for small e-commerce businesses. And really excited to be hosting this now. So, okay, intros aside, excited to jump into the conversation. Krish, I know that you had some remarks prepared just to jump in regarding shipping and the general atmosphere, and as well as some other value-added comments for our attendees today. So I'd love just for you to open up the discussion with some comments.
Sure. Thank you for that. And for anybody wondering, yes, the background is The Office. So hopefully that makes a few people smile on the webinar. What I would say here is, first off, look, it's a difficult time. It's a challenging time for everybody. Your customers, their customers, your vendors. So we're all feeling it. What I would say in one regard, though, is that from a shipping standpoint, we can feel kind of an esprit de corps that we're in it with our customers right now. And you may never have a time again where your customer maybe is understanding about the delivery experience and delivery challenges. So although nobody wants to experiment, like a mad scientist right now with their shipping, just knowing how things are, it may be a time where lightly looking at, some different services, different providers, things like that, can really add some value that you may have a little more leeway with your customers than you normally would. I think that's the first thing. But the second is that if the golden rule is, do unto others as you would have done to you, communicate the shipping policies as you would as an e-commerce consumer yourself. We all buy from a lot of the usual places, and we can all see how they're communicating to us on delivery policies and things of that nature. And I'd say over communicate. Right now, your customers want to know more than ever, is an order delayed? What's going on? And if they need or want to cancel the order because of the delivery experience, I think it's important to give them that option to be able to do it. And I think communicating both the shipping, and of course we're going to talk about returns in a few minutes, and your policies are really important right now to do upfront in the listing itself versus even the checkout or the cart experience. So over communication, and understand that you may not have as much leeway with your customer base on shipping than you do right now. So those would be the comments I would say to start off.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I just, as we continue, I want to remind everyone watching that you can comment into the Facebook Live thread for any questions, and we'll be searching and looking through those questions and bringing them up. And Chris, thanks so much. That kind of question of how should I feel about this time and what should I do? And what I'm kind of hearing overall is that you should feel that everyone's in it together, and then kind of over communicate. Is that accurate?
I would say that's accurate for sure.
That's great. And also I just want to continue to kind of frame the discussion a little bit, because as we zoom in on shipping, there's also a lot of other moving pieces going on in the business, and so and we know shipping impacts several different parts of the business. And I want to just bring up just briefly a diagram that I actually was going to bring up at the beginning, but forgot to. And I want to do that really briefly just to kind of touch on a few different parts of your business right now. And so as we look at this, we're zooming into shipping, but on the whole, when we're looking at our entire business, we're kind of seeing several different departments, and here it's represented by conveyor belts and funnels. This diagram is pretty simple, and you have this sales and marketing funnel that's happening. There's 1,000 actions that happen here. You have your operations that are occurring, where a lot of the delivering on the promises that you make in the sales and marketing funnel come in, and R&D is like product development. What are things that I'm doing to improve the overall system? This raising money funnel is financing injections of cash from the outside, and then the people who help support the entire system. In the middle here is cash flow. And that's what we're also trying to kind of get to the core of in this discussion, is how we can pull different levers within shipping to navigate well, please customers and keep them coming back, but also keep cash flow rolling. And if you're familiar with Amplify, we have a cash flow planner that's available on Amplify.Business. Go there if you want to check that out. But I'll stop talking about that and move on to our next panelist for some more remarks. And so Ryan, I want to move to you, and if you wouldn't mind just again just briefly reintroducing yourself. You're doing a lot right now, and then touching on some of the comments that you had that you wanted to share.
Yeah, sure. So first off, Krish hit a lot of awesome points that I must have somehow copied from him in some way, shape, or form. But I'm coming from the perspective of both an operating entrepreneur, small business, and a consultant working with several other e-commerce entrepreneurs. So when this situation came about and it started looking like things were going to begin shutting down, I mean, beyond, hoping everyone stays safe and we get through this, quickly and quietly, as an e-commerce entrepreneur, I saw this as, it's a huge opportunity. No one's going to be going out to the store to get things. So they're going to be relying more and more on, those shipments coming to them from Amazon, from all of the vendors that are out there. But coming from an operator's perspective, my fear was, our warehouse is even going to remain open. So in terms of like the points that Mark asked me to come up with, thinking about it in terms of an operator, the first thing that comes to my mind as an operator is my warehouse or 3PL, how are they handling this? Have they been communicating with me? Luckily, I have providers that they've been giving me almost daily updates on their operations, whether or not they're providing their employees with proper PPE, and also what are their contingencies. Just because they're operating today, that doesn't mean they're going to continue operating in a week or a month. So that being said, you need to think about what your contingency in turn is, in terms of perhaps moving your inventory out, allocating it from somewhere else. So those are kind of the initial thoughts that came to mind. Then, as Krish mentioned, how am I communicating with my customers? So, the tone depends on the type of product you sell. You really don't want to come across as opportunistic at all, but it is an opportunity. And if you strike the right tone, the goodwill is there. Looking into certain causes that you could somehow support or partner with, that's something I'd really suggest. It's also something that I'm looking into myself right now with, trying to bring up sort of a venture in this climate. So that's sort of the perspective of how do you transition into bringing something to life. And then kind of, if you have a bit more time on your hands to think about, your logistics, is it optimized? So as Mark mentioned, I'm working with him with a client right now, and we're doing a real deep dive into a bunch of different 3PL partner options. So we're looking at everything from, where their 3PLs are positioned in terms of how that relates to the different shipping zones, to focusing on their SKUs and how they're organized. And also one thing that I've focused on a lot in my career is packaging engineering, because your packaging engineering as an e-commerce business is, I mean, it's almost nearly as important as your product itself, because it determines a lot of your costs. So that's something that you would want to be working on if you have the luxury of time to sort of dig into your numbers while we're all riding this out. So kind of in closing, this is an opportunity. You just need to play it right, and you need to ride out the storm. But if you do ride out the storm, it will be, I guess, smooth sailing, for lack of better words.
So I heard a few things in there thanks so much for sharing that. But I heard a couple things that were interesting. You said, tone depends on product, 3PL positioning versus shipping zones, packaging engineering, that kind of the three of the many things really valuable in there. When you talk about tone and tone depends on product, can you give an example of, what would be a poor use of tone and what would be a good use of tone for a product for someone out there?
I mean, it's actually an unfortunate sort of thing, because they meant well, but say I'm close by New York City, so we get a lot of very localized advertising. And a local restaurant in New York, I just recently started getting sponsored ads by them. And they just posted a picture of a t-shirt, and they said, buy this t-shirt. It's supporting our staff. But it's a good cause, but the way it was executed, putting the hard sell out there like that, there's a lot better ways that they could have gone about that. I mean, they did, mention right up front that it was benefiting their employees. But there are so many different ways that you can approach that type of thing than just saying, hey, here's a t-shirt, buy it. A better example of that, I did see a fashion company that is donating a portion of their proceeds to UCLA. So, I mean, just the change in tone there, from just straight up buy this to we're having a sale, a portion of the proceeds are going to this cause. I feel like that, at the very highest level, is just a better way of adjusting your tone.
Thank you for digging into that. And JB, I'd love to hear some of your opening comments as well, being in fulfillment at a 3PL right now. What do you have any thoughts you want to share as we open up?
Well, I'll actually kind of take a step back and say that I think that of all the challenges most of the store owners are going through, I mean, if you're one of our clients, one of our larger clients, they're no longer with us. They're at another 3PL now. They saw layoffs, and they're a large funded organization. And there are small clients that we work with that are concerned about, how am I going to make payroll? Our sales going to continue to be down? We have a lot of other clients that have things up. And as business leadership, even in our case, who we felt really prepared going into this thing, every day is a variable that's very, very difficult to account for. And I think what people forget to do is to sit down and ask themselves, what's most important for me to be working on today, every day? And in a situation like this, where you can have 50 things to potentially work on, knowing what the most important to do can be really difficult. And so the thing that I always remind myself about, and I remind a lot of other business leaders about, is this concept that they teach you when you're learning to fly a plane. And when I first started getting my pilot's license a handful of years ago, you get up in the air and it's so overwhelming. I mean, you can pull back, you can push forward on the yoke, you can turn left, right, push on the rudders, change the radio, do a million different things. But what they tell you is that when you're in an emergency, the most important thing for you to do is to fly the plane. And you might fly into a cloud, or you might end up in some weather, something that you really have no way to kind of account for, or no experience navigating. And so they just tell you, like, get rid of everything and focus on the thing that you actually know, which is keeping the plane level and the wings level, and making sure that you're not going up and upside down, or down and straight into the ground. And then as you have a better sense of which way is up and down and left and right, then you can kind of start adding complexity onto what you're doing. And so for our organization with my store, I sell a lot of, the mural that's behind me is all Texas related stuff. And I sell a lot of products to Texans through our social media feed called Texas Humor. So we've got millions of followers that, love buying our t-shirts and stuff. But at the end of the day, our products are nice to have. So I don't sell disinfecting liquids. I don't sell, masks or gloves or anything like that. So almost immediately, between just people being freaked out about having to stay home and losing their job, and the fact that my customer base is really heavily based in Houston and Dallas and Central Texas, where the oil crash has actually really affected people, our store has just completely been turned upside down. And so a ton of my clients out here in the facility are just having gangbusters, like sales like crazy they've never seen before. Mine, I mean, we're really having to, figure things out. And so I went to my director of marketing and I said, hey, look, just keep your wits about you. That's most important. Nobody likes desperation, even people that want to help. It really does not lend yourself to having a successful business in the long term if you start acting really desperate. So what are the things that we could do as an organization to really, focus on what matters? And so we said, what is the thing about Texas Humor in particular that makes us really unique, that will really stand out? And our brand has always been a really big source of positivity. So we really focused on that and saying, the reason we exist in the first place is because we make killer content. So let's really, really focus on the content, and then start figuring out small bits at a time. What can we add on in terms of marketing? I think, to the earlier point about just not being tone deaf and making sure that you miss the mark, it's so important to not just suddenly like flood your feed with marketing because you're trying to figure out how to make, rent or how to pay your vendors or what have you. Again, the comment that was made earlier about the fact that all of us are going through this together isn't even just unique to our customers. When you're thinking about cash flow, if you're not talking to your vendors and talking to everybody else about, hey, I'm concerned about my income, or I'm concerned about this or that, suddenly now you've got 50 things financially to be concerned with while you're trying to be a really successful creative marketer. And so take as much of that stuff off your plate and push it as far out as possible by either getting, some sort of rent abatement, or talking to your vendors and letting them know that you're going to pay. You just need a little bit of flexibility right now. Because what I've seen as, someone who was in the advertising industry before I got into this industry is that, if you are desperate and rushing to judgment, you don't have the best ideas. Really, desperation is not a place for really solid creative thinking. And so it's so important to really just focus in and say, what is my greatest skill? What do I bring to my business that I'm just exceptional at? How do I fly this plane right now? So that way, when this thing does blow over, my business is still very successful. I don't throw everything about it that I built out the window, and I still have a really solid foundation to land on. And so, for a lot of our merchants, the first week or two is really, really scary, and people are really kind of unsure of themselves and where things were going to go. But long term, what's happened is that, a lot of those businesses have really taken off. And so for our facility, there were a lot of things that had to change. We're only allowed to have a certain number of people in closed spaces. So my leadership team had to get together and pivot around, a brand new schedule that accommodated having no more than about 10 people in any given space within our facility, which meant that we had to break out these new schedules and all of this stuff. And so not only was it just a completely new schedule, all of the things that were great about the culture at our organization are now completely different. Half of my team is working from home. And so every day we really had to sit down and just remind ourselves, it's time to fly the plane. And what does that mean today? So that way I know that I'm making the right decisions in the right kind of vacuum and not trying to just change everything. Because if you'll remember back to our, 6th or 7th grade science classes, when you're going and working through an experiment, it's important to have a control so you know that whatever change in variables you add to the equation, what is actually having an effect positively or negatively on your business. And so, I'm seeing on sort of direct-to-consumer Twitter, there are a lot of really great explorations into this of how much of this is that people are starting to get their $1,200 into their bank accounts right now. How much of this is that my product is something people need? There are so many variables that it's just really, really important to control for a certain number of those. So on the shipping side, I think that the points that were made about over communicating are really key, and the fact that customers just want to be supportive, and going back to the concept of leveraging this equity that we have, the fact that we're all going through it together is so important, because you can get away with that a couple of times. I remember a handful of years ago when it was still just my wife and I running our store. We had a killer Black Friday, had more orders coming in than we'd ever seen before in our lives. And we had one employee. And we got back to Austin and started shipping, and we knew it was going to take 5 or 6 days. And we emailed our customers, and that first batch of people who got that email said, "Oh, it's great. I'm so thankful for your success, and we're here for it," But 4 or 5 days come along, and I'm not communicating quite as much because we're still trying to climb out of this thing. That's when people start getting frustrated. That they're in it when they first are understanding, but there's only so long that you can, kind of point to that and say that this is a problem. And so the last thing I'll say is that it's so important to stop and fix. And so once you've got your feet underneath you and you understand what the problem is that you're trying to tackle, and you understand what it means to fly the plane, now it's important to start saying, well, what's breaking down? The plane's on fire, but why is it on fire? Is it because someone lit a cigarette in here? Is it that the motor, caught on fire? Or is there an electrical fire? And start going through and testing those things out. And so if you start to see success and your store turns around, or maybe if it's not, it's important to really go back and really try to assess what's broken and then spend time fixing it, and you'll hear a lot as you grow the difference between working in your business and on top of it. And in these moments of extreme duress, it's really important to pull yourself out of the business, even if it feels like you don't have the time, and get on top and try to understand what's wrong with this plane that I'm flying right now. So that way I can land it as safely as possible.
JB, thanks so much. Oh, am I unmuted? Yeah. JB, thanks so much. A huge amount of experience and value generated, all pulled together in that. And that flying the plane first, I could talk about that for a while, but I want to, before we continue to dig in, I want to open it up for Ben. Ben, would you mind sharing some of your thoughts as well, just as an opening, and then we can dig into some more specific questions as a group.
So first of all, I think like what everybody said is really on target. So I will try not to repeat what everybody's saying. But yeah, the first thing for me, it's a health crisis. So like the basic needs of everybody are shifted a lot in a few weeks. So now we want toilet paper and pasta. But it's really a manifestation of that. And so I think I will try to focus maybe on maybe smaller operation, but I think you really have to care about safety of your workers. So like, make sure you walk, like respect all the CDC and all the health professional advice, but basically, everybody has to walk at least 2 meters distance. So your shipping station have to be separated. That's one. Gloves, mask. Explain it to your buyer. Like, buyers don't want to endanger anybody. They want to know how you're doing things and if it's safe for them, but also safe for your staff and your personnel. Like, you can you should not go to the post office anymore. Like that's dangerous for everybody involved. So like, print your labels, schedule pickups, organize a zone like for the pickup that is contactless, like maybe in front of your door or of your warehouse, or I don't know how you operate, but basically make sure that like all the exchanges have to be minimized and clearly no contact. And I think it's what everybody expects you to do, but it's super helpful to clarify it. It's like, to take the analogy, it's really what you need to fly the plane today. You didn't need that like 3 weeks ago, but today it's mandatory, and you should really also communicate it to your buyers because it's on everybody's mind. And I think it's very important that you are acting here safely and take care of your own and of your staff. And we mentioned also that now shipping and delivery, it's really where e-commerce, it's the real world. And so like, we are in a unique position, and everybody now measures the importance of these activities. Before it was like a given. And when the packet was late by 1 hour, it was terrible. So now the world is very different. And I think like, we see the importance of this work that was before in the back office, and nobody was really aware of that. In terms of operation, and it's also one of Mark's points, I really think that domestically, I think things are kind of okay. Check with your carriers, obviously, and you should maybe adjust your delivery expectation or delivery promise. So like it's been mentioned before, but try to be as clear as possible in time of crisis. Like, people hate when you're not truthful, bad surprises. So if you can be very clear and including like, hey, you know what, I'm going to have a 2-week delay. I think it's way better to tell it upfront on your online store than post-purchase. So be very, very transparent. Check your carrier before shipping. Internationally, we see it's a bit chaotic. Some countries are blocking actually imports. So Japan is one of them. So same thing, like maybe you will have to revisit in Shopify world, like your shipping settings and your zones. And also like same thing, be transparent. Don't try to sugarcoat reality for buyers. I think you should be very like, hey, sorry, we cannot ship to that country anymore. Give me your email and I will tell you as soon as it's possible. You refund these orders and you're very, very clear that you cannot do it. So yeah, make sure you check that before you ship any package to make sure that it can actually reach the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
Next point is maybe about business growth and survival. So I think like multiple cases here, but it's really about the cash flow engine. So if your only bandwidth was your door, like you're in big trouble. You need to go online as fast as possible. You need to really convert all your buyers that were like in the physical world. You need to bring them into the virtual world of internet. So like that should be your top priority. Like local delivery, like curbside delivery if you want, like enable it on your store. Now also like before the crisis, everybody was not really careful of where they were buying things. Now they really see the value of having the inventory close to home, because when you see, let's say, Shopify Prime member, you get your packages May 26. Everybody is now looking for an alternative, and the local alternative is way better. So like advertise it, enable it on your site. If you are doing a local pickup, if you are the retail location, so same thing, you can do curbside pickups. Make sure to do that because it's a safe way to get the good to the buyer. They can take their car, you put them in the trunk, there's no contact, everything is paid before. It's a great way to keep your physical world clientele happy and using the same delivery process they used before. Gift cards, also great. So everybody want to help. And I think we mentioned that, yeah, you don't want to look desperate. But all birthday, everything now is done remotely via Zoom. So gift card on your shop, is super impactful and effective, and you can also reach out to all your existing customers. and say, you know what, we didn't have gift card, now we have gift card, and if you have, it will help our business. But more importantly, after this crisis, you can come up to the store and when we're back to normal, you can also bring some message of hope here, because at some point we will go back to normal, and you want to be top of mind for these customers. Cash flow is an issue. I know in North America, small businesses have 27 days of cash flow. So we are going to hit that limit very, very soon. I know Shopify Capital really increases the limits and really, is making everything we can to help you. So yeah, don't wait to be out of cash flow. It's the same. You can easily borrow money when you have money. When you have no money, it's super hard. I speak as a past entrepreneur, having a lot of challenges with banks and bankers. So I don't like them, but I know if you have money, if you're in good place now, ask for money right away, and we'll see later why. But yeah, so I think it's important that think long term. Once you have your plane stabilized, you want to have a flight plan. So that's your flight plan, and reach out to everybody that can help. I mentioned it, but free and fast shipping is not top of mind anymore. That's over. So people are really happy if they can get the goods. So I'm not saying increase your prices and so on, but expect that your suppliers will ship to you. It will be more expensive. So a lot of carriers started to increase their prices. So it will cost you more to get your goods. And then decide whether you want to share that cost with your buyers or not, but think about it short term and long term as well, because yeah, fast and free is not a thing anymore. You should consider that. My last point is really tied to a notion called anti-fragile. So it's a book, but it's also one of Shopify core principles that in time of crisis, you have a lot of learnings to do. And to be honest, nobody knows what to do. It's really something you will have to figure out by yourself. And I think I really love GB, it's scientific method. You need to experiment. You need to try things. And for that, you need money, okay? Because it's not free. You need to try new things, how to reach out to your local customers. Do you use Facebook marketing? I don't know. Do you put, I don't know how to do it. But yes, clearly think everything you're doing now as an experiment and try to see what's working, what's not working. So, and then, things like meetups and panels are super helpful because you can learn from others that, experimented and had good success. It will not necessarily work for you, but I think it will give you great direction and great ideas to explore so that you can really, go through that crisis. And I think ultimately the principle of anti-fragile is each time you have a crisis like that, all the survival are way stronger and will really thrive after the crisis. So thank you.
Yeah, Ben, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your insights from Shopify's perspective. I'd love if we could just take a second to, maybe Krish, we're zooming out a little bit and looking at kind of macro level impacts. How has in simple, in short, how has government policy with COVID impacted kind of shipping during this time? And what would you have to share to our audience on that?
Sure. The list to Benoit's point about impacted markets is just growing by the day. And frankly, a lot of the information can be a little difficult to wade through. But at last count, there are about 60 markets where outbound service has been suspended for commercial purposes. So specifically with the USPS. Now, your alternatives are, of course, to utilize a different type of integrator, commercial carrier, a FedEx, UPS, or a different type of carrier along those lines. But clearly that has a big effect because for a long time, both my friends at Shopify and myself, we've been beating the drum of saying, go international, explore the world as far as customers. You have billions out there versus a small fraction here in the US. Now we're kind of looking down and not quite saying that as often, just because certainly our friends on the fulfillment side here in the US, we're saying really talk to fulfillment providers here in the US and take a look at what you can do to grow your domestic sales. So while we haven't seen overall outbound service suspended to markets like the UK or Australia, that are typically very robust for cross-border. We are seeing markets like India, Saudi Arabia, South Africa. These are not insignificant markets that U.S. outbound shippers, if they want to use the postal service, cannot do so right now. And before somebody comes to the conclusion of saying that, hey, okay, I'll just use a commercial carrier. Hey, if my customer wants to pay for it, oh well, that's up to them. You may rush to that judgment to think that, but take a step back for a second. Will you impact your brand too much later by somebody perceiving that later, a year from now, when hopefully all this is resolved, that you have a very high shipping cost? So there are more things at play to your long-term brand that I think that one has to take into account. Relating back to government policies and things like that, I think it's important to check with your carrier specifically. If you have a carrier rep, talk to them, engage with them, find out what their policies and specific surcharges may be. Right now, some of the major carriers are instituting peak season surcharge. Understand how that affects you specifically for international shipments. So again, communicate both with your customers, your vendors, and your shipping transportation providers. And last thing I'll say is I think I learned a very good lesson from this call not to fly on a plane with JB anytime soon.
Well, thank you.
At least I can prioritize and get us mostly on the ground in mostly one piece.
So you can get all those packages to those international markets that have been banned.
Yeah. At this point, I'm looking for reasons to get up. So yeah.
Amen.
I think for international, one of the problems, like just to explain also to your buyers, it's like we don't have any passenger plane anymore. And passenger plane were carrying like 30 or 40% of what's in the plane is actually shipment, not passengers. And so yes, like basically we see price increases internationally because of that, because now we only have 2 cargo planes can be also it's more costly to ship actually, and some countries are definitely not accessible anymore, and we don't know when it's going to change, and it's like really changing daily. Like go to your carrier website. Like that's the only way to know for sure if you can serve these customers.
And so I'm hearing international shipping is more difficult. Focus domestically and talk with your specific fulfillment and shipping carriers and understand what's impacting them. And I know, Ryan, you've worked through some of this right now and with one of your clients. And so can you just talk a little bit about going through that sort of exercise real time and how you might advise someone walking through that process and any specific road bumps they might be facing along the way?
Yeah, sure. So the client that I'm working with now, they've been growing pretty impressively over the past 3 years, and they're actually not really seeing that stopping this coming year. So they reached out to me for not only domestic strategy, but also international strategy. Now, with what was being said, just a few moments ago, that's sort of changing in real time. But what I wanted to look at from their standpoint is what their costs are right now. They're sort of limited. They work in the business of planners. That's what I'll say. And so they're limited in terms of how much they can really reduce their rates because their products weigh a lot. So we've been looking at different factors that go into play based on different 3PLs. There are some 3PLs out there. Actually, one is unfortunately no longer available that offered, flat rate across the board. That was sort of a dream. It was too good to be true. I actually was working with them for about 5 years, but it ended up being too good to be true. So then you have to go to the next step. What's the next step? So when you're shipping, you have your base rate, which you're paying that to the carrier, but then you have picking and packing fees. You have any sort of label fees, whether or not you're buying your packaging from the 3PL or you're supplying it yourself. So what I'm really doing with them now is trying to determine the mix, because really I view, and maybe people on the panel might disagree, but it's across the board, rates are going to be more or less the same at given volume levels. So what I'm trying to do with this client is find the right fit in terms of a 3PL that has fee structure that won't be punishing to them as they scale. So if we can't really control the rates, you know, can we control how much we're paying for additional packaging, or could we swap in our own packaging to save money there? So looking at those different levers that you can pull are ways that, you know, as this scales up, those 30 cents, 40 cents here and there, those are going to add up substantially for the client that I'm working with. And then in terms of, you know, beyond that, rate wise, just optimizing based on where geographically the customers are located. So look at your customer data. Where are your customers? If the majority of your customers are in California, you really shouldn't be shipping from the East Coast. You should be finding, you know, if not in the immediate area in a major city, you should find, you know, at least a hub that's close by. There's some hubs around the country that actually are a bit counterintuitive. I believe Ohio would be one of them. I think DHL actually has their shipping hub there. So you can actually get better rates in places like that. I believe UPS is in Atlanta. Nonetheless, you know, if you can find these different hubs, the rates may be counterintuitive, but really you want to be optimizing based on zones, because you're just going to be paying a lot more if you're not looking at those sorts of things.
Well, and one thing I'd add to that too is really about like what is the headcount at your organization able to manage from a complexity perspective? Because I think those are good points. You know, it's important to consider the location of your inventory, but the fool's errand that I think some of the smaller merchants that we've worked with in the past have gotten into was getting so granular with those exercises while not considering the fact that some 3PLs, although they'll sell you on the idea of being multinodal or what have you, you might not necessarily, like, you might save a lot of money, but the fee structure that they have just means that they just don't hire very good people, to be honest, you know? And so then now, yes, you're saving money on the postage, but you end up having to hire people at your company to manage the 3PL. So there's a little bit of a shell game that comes into play when people are shopping for 3PLs, where they're looking at their P&L and, you know, they're looking at everything above the line, you know, that's affecting their gross margin, and asking themselves, how can I improve my COGS and my margin overall? And let me just hire an outside 3PL that is really, really cheap, and then that'll solve all my problems. And in reality, you just end up shifting that cost below the line to your OpEx. And you have to hire some pretty well-trained, you know, person with a lot of experience managing a 3PL to make up for that gap. And so the example I always give everyone is, you know, I don't think the quote's actually true, but there's a sort of fake quote attributed to the late astronaut John Glenn, that when he was flying into space, it dawned on him that he was flying on the top of a rocket that had been farmed out and contracted to the least common denominator in a government bidding war. And so, you know, I always ask myself, is the best place for me to save money, or you as a merchant, is the best place for you to save money with the partner who literally has your product for the very last time before it arrives with the customer? And so you really have to weigh the quality of the 3PL. And to your point, you know, I think it's so key not to just get caught up on this like super simple pricing structure and say, oh my gosh, like every order is just X, and like now I don't have to worry about anything. Like, you know, I think Easy Post, who just got bought out by Ruby Haas, like, I've gotten so many leads this week of people who were just like, we had this great thing there, sort of, the quality wasn't awesome, but then they just got bought out and now they're not honoring any of their contracts, and people are just freaking out. And 3PLs have just done a absolutely terrible job of lying to people about what is reasonably should be expected. And so we've shifted the responsibility of the merchant of you not having to do some financial calculations on what this pricing structure will look like for your business onto the 3PL and said, let me just give you a round number. But then 3PLs end up signing up for more work than they can really handle for that price.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so important to go through that exercise that you're describing and really like understand, if I pull here, what happens over here, and not just saying like, oh, I'm saving money because I moved over here, because you'll end up just having to hire more people to manage the 3PL.
How would
I know a really good one that you should call if you're looking for help.
And we'll send out Sauceda Industries information after this too, just in case you're wondering. But you know, what, JB, do you recommend people asking if they're right now? People are lined up with their own 3PLs or whatever their supply chain looks like. What are you what is a good question or the right questions to be asking your 3PL right now?
So when I was in advertising, when we would have a client come to us for a branding exercise, they would come and they'd say like, I want a logo. And then they would say, so you know, like when you don't know how to manage a client, you would start working on a logo for them, and they'd say, can you make it more punchy? What the hell does punchy mean? Like that doesn't actually mean anything in the design, you know, world. And so we'd go through this roundabout, and like, here we are 6 weeks later and nobody's actually getting what they want. So from a 3PL perspective, the things that we ask are, what's your average monthly order volume? How many items per order is actually more important than how many orders? Do you require custom packaging? And does it go in like a poly mailer or like an actual box? And what is your typical like SLA requirement? Like, when do you want orders to get out the door? Do most of your customers typically just want them same day, next day? I mean, to Ben's point, like, you don't need to compete with Amazon if you're not selling what Amazon sells. You know, like for Texas Humor, they don't sell my products. And when some knockoff person tries to sell something for my store, I file a form and get it taken off of Amazon. And so you're running your own store with the thing that is unique to your business. Sell it at the pace that you feel is humanly possible to do that, and find a 3PL who can actually deliver on that. But of all the questions that I would ask, I would say, when I have a problem, who am I going to speak with? Because I can guarantee you 99.9% of the time, it's not that sales guy who's trying to get you across the finish line. You've got a salesperson who's never worked in a facility before trying to tell you how good their 3PL is, and they're telling you all the things that they can do. The first thing you should ask them is, if you're not the person who's going to handle my account once it comes on board, who is, so I can talk to them and better understand what our working relationship is going to be. Because I've never seen a 3PL, including mine, who is 100% successful at onboarding and managing everybody's orders right out of the gates. Every time you hire a new 3PL or you hire someone to work in your facility, there's a little bit of time that you have to go through where you learn how the other person likes to dance and what are those cues that you're using to get the job done. And if the 3PL you're trying to sign up for wants to just be a box that you send inventory to and then you don't ever call, it's probably not a very good relationship for smaller merchants. And it's probably somebody who's just, not going to work real well if you show up and say, I just want a logo. So it's so important to just understand the culture of the 3PL and understand, give me some examples of times where your 3PL did something incorrectly. What are some problems that you had that you didn't do so well? And how did you resolve those? Because 3PLs are not actually in the shipping business. They're in the exceptions management business. 95%, 98% of shipping the orders out the door, super, super easy. I can do that in my sleep. It's the 2 or 3% of the times when products show up without barcodes, or something's wrong with, some of these customers' orders, or the new, wholesale management system you implemented on your store breaks down and orders show up into my queue incorrectly. How is the 3PL going to manage that type of problem is actually the biggest thing you should be asking.
Thank you for sharing that. I know there were some hands that went up around around Ryan's comment earlier. What else has come to mind here?
Yeah, so free advertisement, but we launched Shopify Fulfillment Network, working with great partners. So it's not owned by Shopify. Warehouses are owned by partners. And I think we are trying to address like the challenges that have been mentioned basically. So you start with maybe one product and it's small, but then at some point, maybe you do successful marketing and you have a real video in California. So now suddenly you need to move from East Coast to West Coast. So I think we really want to give merchants the flexibility to do that without all the costs. And like to GB's point, I am not expert in 3PL. I built a few integration myself, and I worked for a few weeks actually to understand how it was working as a hands-on experience. So, but yes, like I agree that most of the time it's not, when it's working fine, it's fine. it's all the problems. And so, yeah, I know at Shopify, we have a Shopify fulfillment success manager associated with each merchant. I think the key is in the relationship, like very much what JB was saying. So if you feel good with that person and if you trust it, like, yes, you will be able to figure out solutions that are both, viable from an economic point of view, but more importantly, I think it's really part of the customer journey. So like how you receive your package is key. Like it's part of the experience. You should not sell yourself short. So if you try to shave some cents and dollars, what will happen is like every time somebody opens a box, it's like, oh shit, what happened? It's not great. So like, don't do that for me. Also, it's a variable cost. So it's really, if you have a lot of success, you have a lot of cost, but you have a lot of success. So now it's more like optimization than it should really be about cost cutting. So you want to maintain a great experience and you don't want to cut costs because it's a variable cost. So if you have huge success, that's a good problem to have. Now, if you cut costs day one and now all your orders are like shitty, like that's terrible, and you will never reach the step where you have a nice problem to have. So I think yes, find a good partner. Like make sure you invest in the relationship, trust that relationship, and ask references. That's what I was doing. I was like helping e-commerce companies to find. But so tell me who are your customers, and give me 5 of them. Yeah, and I want 5 happy and 5 not happy, by the way. And don't tell me you have 0 unhappy customers like that. Yeah. Sorry, not happening.
Yeah, we're big fans of the Shopify Fulfillment Network. It's a group of people all really focused on solving problems the right way.
Any other? Yes, Krish?
Yeah, to one of Ryan's points just made me think about something, and that was the importance of packaging. You may not think that packaging is all that important right now in the era of challenges with shipment delays, but it really is extremely important. Couple different reasons. Number one, as we talk about the concepts of cartonization, meaning, how are you going to combine shipments together? Under normal circumstances, you may not care as much because the idea is it just has to go lickety split and it's going to get to the customer because, there's a inventory is here and the delivery promise is here. But in light of the delivery promise not being, where we all want it to be, that part's going to matter. So either to save costs or even to maintain the integrity of the shipping experience, number one, you're going to have to look at packaging. That's one. The second is that, especially as we talk about concepts like returns, which I think we could probably do a whole different session on returns here for the folks on the webinar. But typically industries like apparel, very common to use poly bags, things like that. But depending on what your return policies are going to be or whether you're suspending them at all, investing in different packaging may be wise. For example, I know of an apparel retailer that will accept returns, eventually within their return window, but it actually still has to be in the plastic, which means you obviously can't really ship it in a poly bag to then have it still in plastic. So you're having to shift to some sort of box type of mailing. I think it's important that at this time, you in addition to shipment methods, carriers, services you use, packaging is a really big part of this, and that may not be initially obvious.
Mark, if I could jump in, I've experienced this personally. So with Wool & Oak, it was a leather goods company that I helped a friend launch on Kickstarter, and we found that half of our customers were international customers. So say when we started, I think our first campaign had 3,000 backers. We shipped a big, bulky leather duffel bag. It was beautiful, but I learned a whole lot about dimensional weight versus actual weight. So that was my first foray into that. And it was so shocking to us that by our 4th campaign, we were designing our products around certain sizes of packaging. Mm-hmm. So the biggest insight we had out of everything to fulfill internationally, there are different levels that you'll, like different pricing bands. And we found that for one of our backpacks, if we could fit it into a box that was, you know, a little bit larger than a laptop box versus the box that our manufacturer had recommended, we were going to save $15 per unit. And it was some sort of calculation that I believe DHL had done, that the pricing we were given, that if we were up to a certain dimensional weight, it was like $21. And then it jumped to $35. So that was so enlightening to us that with that venture and all the ventures that I'm involved with now, I take packaging design and optimization as seriously as I take the products themselves. I mean, as long as they're going to be e-commerce products. So if I'm shipping the products around, my product is designed based on, you know, how I'm going to eventually ship it and if that's optimized.
And how
well, and real quick, I mean, on that note, I think it's so important to have that communication from like the marketing team all the way down, because if you don't integrate all of the people together, then that thing, I mean, boot company that we worked with, Tecovas Boots, that was a big issue. I mean, where we were shipping boots that they weighed 6 pounds, but the dim weight on that was about 12. I mean, 6 pound difference in charges is massive for a business if you don't negotiate those rates. And especially when you're a smaller merchant, it's harder to get those better rates on the dims.
And maybe to add to what was said, so like if you think about Shopify stores and so on, like all products from Amazon come in an Amazon box. So like you should really apply the same principle here. Like it's really part of the buyer experience. So you really want your brand on your boxes, and it will really contribute to like brand awareness. And it's really part of the buyer experience. You should really carefully think about packaging and make sure that it's reflecting your values and brand.
And I was going to just ask a question on this topic as a follow-up to what you were talking about, Ryan. Ryan, you were just saying, considering or having actually marketing JB all the way connected to communicating to your fulfillment. Can we talk about why that's important right now in today's environment? Because this concept is universally applicable at any time. Why is it especially important now or not?
I mean, I'll speak for us and say that, I sit in a kind of a funny seat at our company because, although people describe us as a 3PL, we still are very much a retail business that just monetizes an operation that we already do for our own store, right? So I still kind of get to span both seats pretty aggressively. And, all of the things that were touched on today around, like, we had a couple of different options, right? We're going to sell cloth masks on Texas Humor. So we've got a lot of requests for those because people are trying to stay away from buying N95s. So we started looking into it, and our marketing team heard masks and they were like, great, let's do it. And so ran all the way through it. But then from a sourcing perspective, I really started looking at, we had two options. One was like a really flimsy, just kind of piece of cloth. And then another was a more substantial, medical mask looking sort of setup. So it was important, number one, to just know each of those. And then one of the things that I found out was that although the cheaper one was like a quarter of the cost of the other, that sounds huge. It's like, great, I can, donate a little bit more money for each sale, and I can buy way more for the amount of money I'm willing to pay for it. But when I talked to the supplier, they said, just FYI, those masks, although they're really cheap and they're like, okay, they'll last you a couple weeks or whatever, peeling them apart is like trying to count individual pieces of paper. And so if I wasn't aware of that and I had 5,000 of these things show up to my warehouse team would have been pissed off at me, asking them to like individually grab each of these things apart, right? So it wasn't even just the implications of the costs of the product itself. It was like, well, now what do I have to pay these people to individually pull these things apart, let alone the fact that they're just cheap and they're going to fall apart. So it was better to pay 4 times the amount for each mask and save a bunch of money in the warehouse and have a better, customer relationship, to what Krish was saying earlier about it's not just what can I do right now? It's, are the things that I'm doing enabling me to have a really healthy relationship with my customers in 6 or 9 months when they've got money in their pocket,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anyone else have something to add to that?
Yeah, so I think like in terms of crisis, you really want your communication to be super clear. Like, to your point, why now? So I think, like be super clear, like be proactive in your communication and say like that you care. I think it's super important. Like, yes, like say thank you, I think, because like we are buying locally. Maybe they switch their habits from like Amazon or other marketplace to your particular shop. And you really want to inspire like trust. And so I really think all these things are good opportunities to revisit your marketing messages, down to the packaging, but really think about all that and we try to like, not, be super negative and so on, but say thank you, say, it's a crisis, thank you for your support. And then, we go through that together. Like this kind of messaging, I think is super important for everyone. And like everybody will remember. Hypothesis is like the crisis is going to last for some time, and like people will keep their habits after the crisis. So if they selected you, the trusted supplier, will continue to use your services after the crisis. So you should really be mindful of that, and same thing, be transparent, trustful, and say everything very, very precisely to them.
And Krish?
Yeah, I was going to say, just as my closing statement, that look, all the remarks that everybody made here today, a lot of you may be saying, okay, this is common sense. How does somebody not know that already? Or it's fairly intuitive. The reality is, the reason why we are saying it is because the majority of merchants that we're all coming across are not doing that. So the reality is, if you can take to heart some of the things that we're talking about, we're here to help you, that you're going to have ideally a good experience for your customer, B, make your operations better for the long term, and C, have competitive advantages, because these are the mistakes we are seeing from very large merchants right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so thank you guys so much. We have a handful of questions that we are past time on right now. If what we can do is send these questions over, I'd love to see some of your responses. But in conclusion to this, I'd love to just hear briefly from each of you just where we can find you. I'll send this out virtually via email to the rest of the group, but I still would love just right now for anyone who's on, where should people go to get in contact with you or in contact with the resources that that you're representing? Ryan, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. You can find me at TakeItEasyThursday.com. That is my overarching venture. That's how you get in touch with me and see what I'm up to.
Awesome. Krish?
Yeah, a few different ways. Number one, we have some support resources on Shipstation.com/COVID-19. We even have a special 90-day offer, which we typically don't do, for free as a trial. But to get in contact with me, feel free. They're going to send out my LinkedIn contact info after the fact. Just indicate in the invite that you were on the webinar, and I'm happy to connect with you. We'll go from there.
Ben?
So Shopify, we also have a dedicated page, so shopify.com/COVID-19. So same thing, we have 90 days free Shopify, gift card, and a lot of good things here. And same thing for me. I have a funny name, but my LinkedIn contact information, and it will really be my pleasure to help any entrepreneur out there.
Great. And JB?
And for me, we're a 3PL based in Austin, Texas, and hence all the tacos and cowboy stuff. Sauceda Industries, so it's just my last name, SAUCEDA Industries.com. And we love just giving people insights. So even if you're not looking for a 3PL, if you're just looking for a little bit of information, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram, just my full name altogether, JAYB Sauceda. And happy to help you find the 3PL that would be the good fit if you're looking for one, or to be a place to a shoulder to cry on if you're having frustrations with yours.
Absolutely. And just for as far as we go, we're really focused on how do all these things kind of come together and impact bottom line cash flow, because there's that balance between managing, okay, what's the appropriate dim weight to go with to manage the right, to have the right gross margin per unit that would generate the right cash flow, or are we also looking at managing the lifetime value of a customer at the same time? And there's a balance there. And so we're going to love to just help you work through the cash troubles and questions that come up there and applying this specifically to you. And we're Amplify.Business, so www.amplify.business. And I'll also send out some information on us. So again, thank you guys all so much for joining us. And please continue to comment questions on the Facebook Live event right now. We'll try and get back to you with those, and I will send out information to everybody who is in the Meetup.com event. So also go to Meetup.com, Meetup.com / Austin-Shopify-Meetup. So Meetup.com Austin Shopify Meetup. Go there, and you can get all the resources that came out of this time. So again, thank you guys so much, and we really look forward to seeing everyone calmly navigate this COVID-19 storm.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.